Thomas had no memory of parents. No memory of a house with warm lights or a bed that smelled like home. His first memories were of the orphanage, a gray building on the edge of a forgotten town where 50 children slept in rusted bunk beds and learned early that no one was coming for them. The place smelled of mildew and boiled cabbage. The walls were the color of old concrete, and the windows were covered with bars that adults claimed were for safety but everyone knew were to keep children from leaving. Thomas was 9 years old. He had been there as long as he could remember. Maybe longer. The director, a thin woman with tight lips and cold eyes, sometimes mentioned that he had arrived as an infant, left on the steps during a winter storm. No note. No name. Just a baby wrapped in a gray blanket. They named him Thomas because it was the name day on the calendar when he was found. He was quiet. Too quiet, the caretaker said. He watched everything with dark, unblinking eyes that made adults uncomfortable. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, and even then his answers were brief and careful. The other children avoided him. Not because he was cruel or strange, but because there was something about Thomas that felt distant, as if he existed slightly outside the world everyone else lived in. He spent most of his time in the narrow courtyard behind the orphanage, sitting on the cracked steps and staring at the mountains beyond the fence. The peaks were always visible, jagged and dark against the sky, and Thomas felt drawn to them in a way he could not explain. When visitors came to the orphanage looking for children to adopt, Thomas was never chosen. He did not smile. He did not perform. He simply stood in the line with the others, hands at his sides, watching the adults with that unreadable expression that made them uncomfortable. One afternoon, a woman with kind eyes and a soft voice crouched in front of him and asked what he liked to do. Thomas looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I like to wait," he said. "For what?" she asked. He did not answer. The woman adopted a younger boy instead. The orphanage operated under strict rules. Wake at dawn. Cold showers. Thin porridge for breakfast. Chores until noon. School lessons in a dim classroom with broken chairs and outdated books. More chores. A small meal at dusk. Bed by 8. Punishments for disobedience were swift. Children who broke the rules were locked in the basement for hours, sometimes days. Those who caused repeated problems simply disappeared. The director claimed they had been transferred to other facilities, but the remaining children whispered different theories in the dark. Thomas never caused trouble. He followed every rule. He completed every task. He made himself invisible. But invisibility had limits. One evening in late autumn, the director called Thomas to her office. It was a small room with a single desk, a filing cabinet, and a window that looked out onto nothing. She sat behind the desk, writing in a ledger, and did not look up when he entered. She said. Thomas sat in the wooden chair across from her. His feet did not touch the floor. The director finished writing, closed the ledger, and finally looked at him. Her expression was unreadable. "You are 9 years old now," she said. "Old enough to understand certain realities." Thomas said nothing. "The orphanage does not have unlimited resources. We receive funding for each child, but that funding decreases as you age. By the time a child reaches 10, they are considered less desirable for adoption. Less valuable." She folded her hands on the desk. "We have an arrangement with certain families in the region. Families who need help with farm work, household duties and other tasks. In exchange for labor, these families provide housing and meals. It is a fair system." Thomas understood immediately. She was not talking about adoption. She was talking about selling children to work. "You will be leaving in 3 days," the director continued. "A family has already agreed to take you. You should be grateful for this opportunity." Thomas looked at her for a long moment, then stood and walked out of the office without a word. That night he could not sleep. He lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the breathing of the other children around him. He knew what happened to children who were sent to work for those families. Some came back years later, broken and silent. Most were never seen again. He had 3 days. But Thomas did not wait 3 days. The storm came the next night. It arrived without warning, a violent autumn tempest that shook the orphanage walls and turned the courtyard into a river of mud. Thunder cracked like cannon fire. Rain hammered the roof in deafening waves. During the chaos, a section of the courtyard wall, already weakened by years of neglect, simply collapsed. The sound was lost beneath the roar of the storm. Thomas was awake. He had not been sleeping. When he heard the crash, he moved without thinking. He climbed down from his bunk, walked through the dormitory, descended the stairs, and stepped into the courtyard. Rain soaked him instantly. Lightning illuminated the collapsed wall, a gap wide enough to walk through. Thomas walked through it. He did not run. He did not look back. He simply walked into the storm, into the night, into the unknown. He followed the road at first, a narrow dirt path that led away from the orphanage toward the mountains. The rain made it nearly impossible to see, but Thomas kept moving, one foot in front of the other, driven by an instinct he could not name. Hours passed. The storm began to weaken. Dawn arrived as a pale gray light that barely penetrated the clouds. Thomas had no idea where he was. The road had disappeared somewhere behind him. He was walking through dense forest now, wet and cold, his clothes clinging to his skin. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but he ignored it. He kept walking. By midday the rain had stopped entirely. The forest opened into a clearing where the ground sloped upward toward the base of the mountains. Thomas climbed without hesitation, his small hands gripping rocks and roots as he ascended. He did not know why he was climbing. He only knew that he had to. The sun was setting when he reached a plateau covered in smooth gray stones. The air was thin and cold. His breath came in visible clouds. And then he saw it. A rock formation unlike anything he had ever seen. It rose from the plateau like a monument, towering and ancient, its surface covered in dark patterns that might have been natural or might have been carved by human hands centuries ago. At the base of the formation was an opening. Not a crack or a gap, but a deliberate entrance, perfectly shaped, leading into darkness. Thomas approached slowly. His legs were shaking from exhaustion, but something pulled him forward. He stood at the threshold and looked into the blackness beyond. The air coming from inside was warm. Dry. It smelled faintly of earth and something else, something metallic and old. Thomas stepped inside. The darkness was absolute. He moved forward carefully, hands outstretched, touching the walls on either side. They were smooth. Too smooth to be natural. Someone had carved this passage. After several minutes of walking, he saw light ahead. Faint. Flickering. He emerged into a chamber. It was vast. The ceiling was high and domed, and there was a natural opening at the top that allowed pale sunlight to filter down in a single shaft. The walls were covered in markings, symbols carved deep into the stone. They glowed faintly as if lit from within. Thomas stood frozen, staring. And then his eyes fell on the words carved into the center of the chamber floor, directly beneath the shaft of light. The letters were large and unmistakable. Thomas, you arrived on time. His name. His exact name. Carved into stone that looked centuries old. Thomas felt something cold spread through his chest. He stepped closer, crouching to touch the letters. The stone was real. The carving was deep and weathered. He looked up slowly, scanning the chamber. That was when he noticed the objects. In one corner, there was a pile of neatly folded blankets. Beside them, containers of water, sealed and clean. A small stack of preserved food. Clothing in various sizes, all for children. Someone had prepared this place. Recently. For him. Thomas stood and walked to the walls. The symbols were everywhere, covering every surface. They were not random. They formed patterns, sequences, organized into sections like chapters in a book. He moved closer to one section and realized with a shock that he could read some of the markings. Not all of them, but enough. They were names. Dates. Messages. Eleanor, 1823, I was afraid but I chose the blue path. James, 1834, the red path leads to shadow. Maria, 1845, trust the gold. Simon, 1856, do not follow me. On and on. Dozens of names. Dozens of children. All with dates spaced exactly 11 years apart. Thomas traced his finger along the wall, following the timeline forward. The pattern continued without interruption. Every 11 years. Always a child. Always 9 years old. The most recent entry made his blood turn cold. Anna, 2012, do not take the red path. Thomas will come next. 11 years ago. Thomas stepped back from the wall, his heart pounding. This was impossible. How could someone in 2012 know his name? How could they know he would come here? He turned slowly, scanning the chamber again. There were 3 tunnel entrances leading out of the main room, each marked with a symbol carved above the opening. A red circle. A blue triangle. A gold star. 3 paths. Thomas walked to the red tunnel and peered inside. It sloped downward into darkness. The air coming from it was cold and carried a faint smell of decay. The blue tunnel was level and wide. The air was neutral, neither warm nor cold. The gold tunnel sloped upward. Warm air flowed from it and there was a faint sound, almost like wind or breathing. He stepped back into the center of the chamber and looked at the walls again. There had to be more information. More clues. He found it near the back of the chamber, a section of wall covered in symbols that were different from the others. These were not names or dates. They were instructions. Thomas could not read all of it, but he understood enough. The child who arrives must choose. Red path, return to the world. Safety. Forgetting. Blue path, remain in between. Watch. Wait. Gold path, ascend. Remember. Become. Choose before the moon rises 3 times. Thomas looked up at the opening in the ceiling. The light was fading. Night was coming. He had 3 days to choose. But he did not understand what he was choosing between. He walked back to the supplies and sat down on one of the blankets. His body ached with exhaustion. His mind was spinning. He ate a small portion of food, drank water, and wrapped himself in a blanket. The chamber was warmer than outside, but still cold enough to make him shiver. As he lay down, staring up at the faint glow of the symbols on the walls, he tried to make sense of what he had found. This place was ancient. The markings went back hundreds of years. And yet someone had left fresh supplies. Someone knew he was coming. And every child who had come before him had been 9 years old, arriving exactly 11 years after the previous one. What was this place? What were the 3 paths? Thomas closed his eyes, but sleep did not come easily. His mind replayed the markings on the wall. The names. The warnings. Do not take the red path. What was wrong with the red path? And what did ascend mean? What would he become? Hours passed. Eventually, exhaustion won. Thomas fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. He woke to the sound of footsteps. His eyes snapped open. The chamber was dark now, lit only by the faint glow of the symbols. The opening in the ceiling showed stars. The footsteps were slow and deliberate. They echoed from somewhere deeper in the cave system. Thomas sat up, his heart racing. Someone else was here. He stood quietly and moved toward the blue tunnel, where the sound was coming from. He pressed himself against the wall, barely breathing. The footsteps grew louder, closer. And then a figure emerged from the darkness. It was a girl. She looked about his age, maybe a little older. Her hair was long and tangled, and her clothes were strange, old-fashioned, like something from a history book. She was carrying a small lantern that cast a warm glow around her. She stopped when she saw Thomas. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she smiled. "You came," she said softly. "I knew you would." Thomas stared at her. "Who are you?" The girl set the lantern down and sat on one of the stones near the chamber wall. "My name is Anna," she said. "I arrived here 11 years ago. Just like you." Thomas felt the cold spread through his chest again. "You are Anna? The one who left the message?" She nodded. "I have been waiting for you, Thomas." "How do you know my name?" "Because it has always been your name," she said. "Just like it was always my time 11 years ago and Eleanor's time before me and James before her. The pattern does not change." Thomas stepped closer, his fear mixing with confusion. "What is this place?" Anna looked up at the glowing symbols on the walls. "This is a crossing," she said. "A place where lost children are given a choice. We are not chosen by chance. We are called, marked. And when we arrive, we must decide which path to take." "The 3 paths," Thomas said. "Yes. Red, blue, and gold." Anna stood and walked to the red tunnel entrance. "The red path leads back to the world," she explained. "If you take it, you will forget everything. The orphanage. This place. The markings. You will wake up in a safe home with people who love you. You will live a normal life. But you will never remember who you truly are." She moved to the blue tunnel. "The blue path is where I have been for 11 years. It is the space between. If you take it, you become a guardian. You watch over the crossing. You prepare the chamber for the next child. You wait." "And the gold path?" Thomas asked. Anna turned to look at the gold tunnel, and for the first time, her expression changed. There was something in her eyes, fear and longing mixed together. "The gold path is ascension," she said quietly. "It is the path of remembering. If you take it, you will learn the truth about who you are. Why you were called here. What you are meant to become." She paused. "But no one who has taken the gold path has ever returned." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. "Then how do you know what it does?" "Because they leave messages," Anna said. She pointed to a section of the wall Thomas had not noticed before. He walked over and read the carvings. "I remember now. I was never lost. Eleanor. I see everything. The pattern is endless. James. I am home. Maria." Thomas looked back at Anna. "What does it mean?" "I do not know," she admitted. "But I think it means they found something we cannot understand from here." "Then why did you not take it?" Thomas asked. Anna looked down at her hands. "Because I was afraid," she said. "I chose the blue path because I thought waiting was safer than risking everything. I thought maybe the next child would be braver than me." She looked up at him. "But now I know I was wrong." Waiting is not living. It is just another kind of forgetting. Thomas felt something shift inside him. He looked at the 3 tunnels, then back at Anna. What happens if I do not choose? You will fade, Anna said. If you do not choose before the 3rd moon rises, you will become part of the stone. Just another name on the wall. Another warning for the next child. Thomas swallowed hard. How much time do I have? 2 more nights, Anna said. She picked up the lantern and held it out to him. Explore, she said. Walk the tunnels. See what you feel. But do not enter fully until you are certain. Once you step beyond the threshold, there is no turning back. Thomas took the lantern. The metal was warm in his hands. Anna smiled at him one more time, then turned and walked back into the blue tunnel. Her footsteps echoed for a moment, then faded into silence. Thomas was alone again. He stood in the center of the chamber, holding the lantern, staring at the 3 paths before him. Red, blue, gold, safety, waiting, truth. He had 2 days to decide who he wanted to be. Thomas spent the next hours exploring the edges of each tunnel, careful not to cross the threshold Anna had warned him about. The red tunnel felt wrong the moment he approached it. The air was heavy and smelled faintly of chemicals, like medicine or disinfectant. When he held the lantern inside, the light seemed to dim as if something in the tunnel absorbed it. He saw markings on the walls just inside the entrance. Names of children who had taken this path. Samuel, I forgot. I am happy. Clara, they love me. I do not remember WY. Lucas, IT does not hurt anymore. The messages were short, simple. And they all had the same hollow feeling, as if something essential had been removed from the words. Thomas stepped back. He did not want to forget. Even if his memories were painful, they were his. The blue tunnel was different. The air was still and neutral, neither welcoming nor hostile. He walked a little farther inside and the lantern revealed more carvings. These were longer, more detailed. Messages from the children who had become guardians. I have waited 33 years. 3 children have come. I prepare. I watch. I remember everything. Michael, 1912. I am not lonely. I am needed. The crossing must be protected. Ruth, 1956. I thought I was afraid. Now I understand fear is just love that has not found its purpose. David, 1989. Thomas felt something stir in his chest. These guardians had chosen to stay, to help others. There was something noble in that. But Anna had been here for 11 years. She had waited for him. And now she regretted it. Was waiting the same as hiding? Finally, Thomas approached the gold tunnel. The warmth coming from it was stronger now, almost like standing near a fire. The air smelled clean like mountain wind and something sweet he could not name. He held the lantern up and stepped just inside the threshold. The walls of the gold tunnel were covered in symbols that glowed brighter than anywhere else in the chamber. They pulsed softly like a heartbeat. And the messages here were different. They were not carved. They were written in light, glowing faintly against the stone. We were never abandoned. We were planted. Eleanor. The world thinks we are lost. But we have been found. James. I see my parents now. They were always with me. Maria. There is no end. Only continuation. Simon. Thomas felt tears sting his eyes. He did not understand the words fully, but he felt them. They resonated somewhere deep inside him, in a place he had forgotten existed. He stepped back from the gold tunnel and returned to the center of the chamber. The lantern flickered in his hands. He sat down and stared at the opening in the ceiling. The stars were bright and clear. He wondered if his parents, whoever they were, had ever looked at the same stars. He wondered if they had loved him. He wondered if they had left him on purpose or if something terrible had happened. For the first time in years, Thomas allowed himself to cry. Not loud, heaving sobs, but quiet tears that slid down his cheeks and dripped onto the stone floor. He cried for the life he never had. For the parents he never knew. For the years in the orphanage where no one chose him. And he cried because for the first time he had a real choice. A choice that mattered. Morning came slowly. Thomas woke stiff and cold, curled on the floor of the chamber. The lantern had burned out during the night. He stood and stretched, then ate a small portion of food and drank water. His body was sore, but his mind felt clearer. He had one more night to choose. He spent the day exploring the main chamber more carefully, reading every name, every message, every warning. He traced the timeline on the walls, following the pattern of children arriving every 11 years, each one 9 years old. And then he found something he had missed before. Hidden near the base of the wall, almost covered by dust, was a small carving. It was different from the others. Older. The symbols were faded and difficult to read, but Thomas knelt and carefully brushed away the dust. It was a message in a language he did not recognize, but beneath it, someone had translated it into English. This place was built by those who remembered. It will stand until all children remember. The lost are not lost. They are becoming. Thomas sat back on his heels, staring at the words. Becoming what? He looked up at the gold tunnel. The warm air was still flowing from it, steady and constant. That night Anna returned. She appeared from the blue tunnel just as the stars became visible through the opening in the ceiling. She was carrying a new lantern, and she sat down beside Thomas without speaking. They sat together in silence for a long time. Finally Thomas spoke. Do you regret staying? Anna looked at him, and her expression was sad and kind at the same time. Every day, she said. But I also know I was not ready to take the gold path. I was too afraid. Maybe I needed to wait here so I could meet you. Maybe that was my purpose. Thomas nodded slowly. What will you do after I choose? Anna smiled faintly. If you take the red path, I will keep waiting for the next child. If you take the blue path, we will wait together. And if you take the gold path, she paused. I think I will finally follow you. Thomas looked at her in surprise. You would leave? Anna nodded. I have spent 11 years preparing you to make the choice I could not make. Maybe that is enough. Maybe it is time for me to stop being afraid. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. She handed it to Thomas. It was a smooth stone, perfectly round, with a single symbol carved into it. The symbol for remembering. Eleanor left this for me, Anna said. She told me to give it to the next child. And to tell you that whatever you choose, you are not alone. Thomas closed his hand around the stone. It was warm. Thank you, he said quietly. Anna stood and looked at the 3 tunnels one last time. Tomorrow night is the 3rd moon, she said. You must choose before it rises fully. I will be here with you. She walked back into the blue tunnel and Thomas was alone again. He lay down with the stone in his hand and stared up at the stars. He thought about everything he had learned. Everything he had felt. The red path was escape. The blue path was service. The gold path was transformation. Which one was he? The next day passed slowly. Thomas did not explore. He did not read. He simply sat in the center of the chamber and thought. He thought about the orphanage and the children still trapped there. He thought about the director who had tried to sell him. He thought about all the years he had spent invisible and silent. And he thought about the words carved in light inside the gold tunnel. We were never abandoned. We were planted. What if it was true? What if he had not been left behind but sent ahead? What if his whole life had been leading to this moment, this choice? As the sun set on the 3rd day, Anna returned. She sat beside him and waited. The moon began to rise, visible through the opening in the ceiling. It was full and bright. Thomas stood. He looked at the 3 tunnels one last time. Then he turned to Anna. I'm not afraid anymore, he said. Anna smiled. I know. Thomas walked toward the gold tunnel. He stopped at the threshold and looked back. Are you coming? Anna stood and walked to his side. She took his hand. Yes, she said. I am ready. Together they stepped into the gold tunnel. The moment they crossed the threshold, the symbols on the walls blazed with light. The warmth surrounded them like an embrace, and Thomas felt something shift deep inside him, something that had been locked away his entire life. Memories flooded back. Not memories of the orphanage or the storm, but older memories. Deeper memories. He remembered a voice singing. A hand holding his. Warm light. Love. He remembered being told, you will forget for a while, but when it is time, you will remember. You will choose. And when you choose, you will become who you were always meant to be. Thomas understood now. He had not been abandoned. He had been sent. The tunnel ahead glowed brighter, and Thomas and Anna walked forward together, hand in hand into the light. Behind them, the chamber remained. The symbols on the walls pulsed softly, waiting. In 11 years, another child would arrive. Another name would be carved. Another choice would be made. The crossing would always be there. And the lost would always have the chance to become found.